We are live.
All right. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our Tuesday, September the 22nd agenda session. Could I get approval of the minutes?
So moved.
Second.
Move to approve.
All right. Minutes will stand as approved and as recorded. On our agenda this afternoon, we do have a couple of planning items on final read. Is there anything that needs to be brought to our attention on either one of these two items? Councilman Ledford.
Chairman, can I ask the chair if he's okay with his amendments from last week?
I am, sir. Thank you very much. We're good to go on the amendments from last week.
Very good. Thank you, sir.
And by the way, Mr. Bridger sent me an email. I do have an email from the applicant stating that he is agreeable to these amendments.
Okay.
Just for the record.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. A couple of items under Public Works, C, D, and E. Any questions concerning those final readings? Okay. If not, we will move to ordinances on first reading. Madam Clerk, would you read 6A, please?
An ordinance to amend the operations budget ordinance number 13558, known as the fiscal year 2020 to 2021 operations budget ordinance, so as to appropriate $1.5 million from the general fund reserves to the Electric Power Board of Chattanooga for the Hamilton County Schools Education Connect initiative, which has been covered by favorable operations during fiscal year 20.
Okay. Questions or comments on this item? All right, I see no hands. 6B, please.
An ordinance to amend the operations budget number 13558, known as the fiscal year 2020 to 2021 operations budget ordinance, so as to replace page 69 of the general pay plan to be consistent with approved operations funding and only provide for increases to employees who are not paid in the amount of the federal poverty guidelines.
All right. We have Councilwoman Burrs, followed by Councilman Gilbert.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I asked Mara, there has been some confusion about this. And so I've asked Mara if she would please explain why we have an alternative version here, which one we're talking about. I think it's a bit unclear. So I've asked her please to do that if she will, please.
Okay. Looks like Miss Lydia is on it. Good afternoon, Ms. Sullivan.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. How are you today?
I'm well.
Good.
Do you think you can explain this to where we can all understand it?
I'll do my best. Page 69, as you know, of the ordinance, of the budget ordinance, was a mistake. We had a human error with that page 69, and we are asking that you replace that page 69, that we go back in time and correct that error, replacing page 69 with the new page 69 that we've given you. The only thing that we would like for you to do in that is also the people who would have gotten the increase to their pay by virtue of the federal poverty rate increase that we have agreed to do, that we desire to do, and that we told you about in the budget. We would like for those folks to be able to get their pay retroactively back to July 1. So all of the budget amendments that are before you take effect on the date that you vote on them. This one is the only one that we would like to have a retroactive date of July 1 on it. So that's why you have the retroactive version, I believe that it's called. So we would like for you to consider approving the retroactive version of page 69 back to the July 1st date.
Thank you, Mara.
Thank you, Councilwoman.
You good, Councilwoman Burrs?
Yeah.
All right. Councilman Gilbert.
Yes, Chair, can you bring up Miss Daisy too?
Miss Lydia can.
Sir. Thank you, ma'am.
She's on her way.
All right, Miss Madison, could you unmute? And
She is,
there we go.
There I am.
Good afternoon, Miss Madison.
Good afternoon, council members.
Councilman Gilbert has a question for you, ma'am.
Yes, I know that Mayor Byrd and administration always look ahead and try to plan for the future of different or major projects. And I know we began to start talking about the compensation study in 2018, 2019, 2020, beginning. And if I'm not mistaken, that we set aside X amount of dollars to, in this program, to anticipate that it will cost quite a bit of money. Even though we didn't have a study at that time, but we did know that it was going to be a cost factor in there. How much money did we set aside for this study?
Okay, Councilman, thank you. That's an ongoing question. Each year we do an operations budget, and that budget covers the period July 1 through June 30, to June 30, all of the costs associated with that period. And operationally, the base of budget that you set means that I can carry this amount of dollars or this amount of cost in the future with the existing source of revenues or the available revenues that I anticipate. So, and the years that you are referring to, when we were anticipating the compensation implementation, we did set aside dollars, and I think last year was about $1.5 million. Just like with anything else, and I think we may have done that 2 fiscal years. Just like with anything else, if those dollars are not used, they are reverted to the general fund reserves. The problem with, so and they are then used for capital type expenditures. To try to use those dollars for a subsequent year's operations cost sets a base that is not sustainable in the future years, because unless I have enough revenues in the next year to cover the reserves that I had that went to reserve, that $1.5 million, then I have set up a budget that is not sustainable. So it's the basic concept, the basic principle that says you cannot use reserve dollars to pay salaries or other ongoing operations unless you can identify increased revenues in the future years that are equal to or more than that amount to sustain it.
Well, excuse me. By you saying that we put aside 1.5 million in the fiscal year 2019, 2020, which is 1.5 million. At that time, COVID was not present until after in 2020. Our fiscal budget for that year was from 20 to 19 to 20 of June of 31st or June 30th. So by having that 1.5 million there, why did we not use that 1.5 million for the raises that we could give to the employee?
Well,
COVID was not.
That's what I was just trying to explain. You could not, because unless I can sustain that $1.5 million increase in pay in subsequent years, then I'd have to take that raise back in the next year. So that's why you can't do that.
So you're saying that 1.5 million that we could give the employees, we had to put it into reserve?
When we were not able to finalize the compensation plan in a manner that we can professionally or support a plan that would allow that, yes, those monies were used for either used for other purposes. And quite honestly, when they go into the reserves, each year it allows us to do one-time type expenditures that we had not anticipated. But the big issue here is
But I must understand something. I know we went and had a study on around, I think it was February the 12th and the 14th, about the studies, the compensation study. We knew at that time it was 3 categories. It was costing X amount of dollars. I think one of them was 10 million, one was I think 6 or 4. Since by us knowing this, then why did we not take that 1.5 million and move forward toward the compensation study so we already know the cost?
Well, actually, cost is one thing, and I think there were questions that were raised even by this council as we brought it forth relative to benefits and things of that nature. But the implementation is another issue. And it's like with anything, lots of times you come up with a plan, and I don't think that plan was totally finalized until last budget year in terms of what an estimated cost is. But even with that, it was $8 million or $10 million. So then the next step became, how do I implement a $10 million plan or an $8 million plan? And that was that, you know, in a way that is fair and equitable to all of the employees. And that piece is still basically under consideration, under discussion, and as we move forward.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Councilman Byrd.
Thank you, Chair. Maura, help me understand, because I talked to some city employees and they came to me and said that, hey, regular employees are not getting raises this year. The people that are making $50,000 and up are getting raises this year. And I said, no, nobody is getting a raise this year because of the situation we're in. And do any one of these, which one of these make sure we take care of those lower employees at the bottom that are not making the money that they should be making? Because we know that they've been fighting for these raises forever and we want to give them to them. But if it's not there, I do understand that we can't move forward. But I just want to make sure which one of these versions that we need to be voting on to make sure that we're taking care of those ones that's in that poverty level.
Well, thank you for that. And no, sir, we do not have any raises for anyone this year. Thank you for letting me know that there's still some confusion about that. And we'll work harder to make sure that that is not a confusion. And the one that they both do the same thing, both versions do the same thing. They replace page 69 with the correct budget plan, pay plan, excuse me, that we presented in the budget. But one of them does it a little better than the other. The one that says retro version does it a little better. It's a retroactive version. It allows us to pay the people who are not at that federal poverty rate all the way back to July 1. So they'll get a little lump sum and then move forward from there. So it allows us to pay back to July 1. So retroactive version does it a little better.
Does it a little better. Okay. I might have to call you a little bit better after this so we can talk some more customers. All right, thank you. Oh
yeah, absolutely. And again, it's the same. You're paying the folks who make the difference in the federal poverty rate this year. Our base salary is $12.38 per hour in last fiscal year. And then this year to move it to the federal poverty rate, which is $12.60 an hour this year, we should have had a pay plan in that indicated that, and that is all. That's what was supposed to be on page 69 of this year's budget. And if it had been, then that would be the only, that would be what you would be approving today, is what we're asking you to approve today, is so that that could begin on July 1st.
Okay.
Retroactively back.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
All right. Any other questions? Councilwoman Coonrod.
Thank you, Chair. If I'm not mistaken, I think we kind of touched on all those questions that's being asked today, that the purpose of it for us to even bring it up by Daisy and more the administration was because it was only a draft copy. And in that draft copy, it was saying that people that make a higher end of the income, they were going to get a 15% raise. And the people who were on the lower end, they weren't going to get nothing but a 2% raise. So I can see how employees are kind of confused about it because no one really took the time to say, hey, we're going to make sure that this doesn't happen because we want to protect the people that's not making the federal poverty guideline rate. So that's how I took it, and that's how I explained to my District 9 constituents. But I think, but I'm more concerned of the employees who actually are going to be getting a raise. Do we have like the classifications that's going to be getting an increase in the wages? So is it like janitorial or receptionist or Miss Ruth or, those type jobs?
Yes, we do. We do have those classifications, and I can get, we have all of that lined out. I can get HR to send that to you, or finance. I'm not sure which one. You probably both have it, so we can send that to you probably this afternoon.
Okay, thank you. And I know
people who were making $12.38 at the bottom of the pay scale right now, and $12.38 per hour.
So the next budget cycle, because as I heard you say, Ms. Daisy, because I want to make sure, because I know it'll be a lot of noise if this passed or not, that from what I spoke with you and asked you about, so we can't, and how you've explained it to Russell, and sometimes you got to break it down on a rudimentary level to me. I want to make sure I really understand it, so I won't ask the same questions again. What you're saying is that in this operating budget, in order for us to use those funds, the $1.5 million or so, we have to be able to show year after year after year how we can sustain those raises. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
Okay, so if we're not, then we can't use that money.
Absolutely. Not for
Okay, just want to make sure I understand it because, Russell, he eloquently asked the questions in 3 different ways. Want to make sure that I'm not getting confused. But, so I'm good. Thanks.
Thank you.
Councilman Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Maura, Councilwoman Coonrod touched on a point softly, and I just want to make sure that it is really clear for employees, because we keep saying there are no raises, but then there are raises. So once again, restating what we're doing is bringing that base, or bringing them to the federal base. Did you say 1238? Is that right?
We're currently at 1238, and the new federal poverty rate is 1260 per hour.
Okay, 1260. Okay, I thought it was a little higher than that. So will there be, at the time we bring everybody to 1260, will there be any city employees that will be making less than 1260?
They're not in the general pay plan, no.
Okay, nobody in the general pay plan. So this does not necessarily work with firefighters, police officers, or anybody that may start lower than that.
Well, they have a different pay plan, but they're all higher than that.
So they're all higher than that.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay, Councilman Gilbert, is that an old hand?
Yes, new hand. I've got one more question for Daisy.
Okay.
In the past, since you've been into the city for a long period of time, have we ever carried over funds for projects
From reserves?
for 2 years?
No.
Okay.
When you say for projects for 2 years, if there is a capital project, or if there is something that is not the operations fund, that's why we put them as special projects. Those dollars do carry over from year to year. But if it is general fund operations, they do not carry over. And if they go into general fund, they are only used for one-time type expenditures. I mean, guys, that's just one basic principle from governmental or just sound financial management, that your savings are not for operations. Your savings or the idea is that it's to cover those unforeseen type items. Salaries and benefits are not unforeseen. And the idea that the idea that if I spend it without a plan to sustain it, then it's short term, it's very short sighted. And from the bond underwriters, they want their bonds are 15, 20 years. So they want to make sure that you are making sound financial decisions that assure that operationally you are going to be in a position to pay that debt. And when you start doing funding your operations from reserve, that essentially tells them that you're not bringing in enough money to cover those basic salary costs and others.
So you say, I can only keep on saying reserve, but I was just speaking of the money being there present
Right.
in July the 30th, that we could have moved it to somewhere for the employees to have some type of raise.
But it is still a one-time expenditure. It's not recurring. It has
So-
operations costs need to be covered from recurring dollars, meaning I expect it next year and the next year and the next year.
Well, we will give a raise next following year, next year, following year too. So again, that's how I feel.
I hope so. I hope the revenues can support it.
Okay, council, we do need an attorney-client privilege meeting this afternoon. So just keep that in mind. I do want you to get questions answered about this item. Councilwoman Coonrod, is that a new hand?
It's a new hand, and it's my last thing, because I just realized Bird, he made a good point, like how, our employees, they'll think, oh, well, we're not getting a raise, or people that make more money get a raise. And they confuse that sometimes with a person getting a promotion. Raise and promotions are two different things. So just for the record, I mean, I know we all know what that means, but just for the record, Mara, Daisy, do you mind just giving us a little snippet of what that means? This is what it means when you're gonna get a raise. This is what it means if you're gonna get a promotion, because they'll look at the promotion and think, well, Alice got promoted to be executive director, so now she's making $25,000 more. She got a raise, but it's actually a promotion. So do you mind explaining that? Well, I think I just did. Thank you, Chair.
I think you did a good job, Councilwoman.
I got it.
I got it.
All right. Any other questions on this retro version before we move on? I'll tell you what, Ms. Sullivan, Ms. Daisy, just hang around till we get through these next two items, just in the event that there's more questions. Madam Clerk, let's read C, please.
An ordinance to amend capital improvements budget ordinance number 13559, known as the fiscal year 2020 to 2021 capital budget ordinance, so as to appropriate $150,000 from the Department of Economic and Community Development Capital Project Public Art in new capital construction to the Southeast Tennessee Development District for the Artists' Work Program.
Okay. Questions or comments on this item? I see no hands. All right, let's do 6D, please.
An ordinance to amend capital improvements budget ordinance number 13559, known as the fiscal year 2020 to 2021 capital budget ordinance, so as to appropriate $531,036 additional transportation improvement program funds to Transportation Capital Project Pavement Management 2 for the Bailey Avenue and Chestnut Street TIP paving projects.
Questions or comments? Okay. All right, Miss Lydia, if you would excuse Miss Madison and Miss Sullivan.
Yes, sir.
Let's move into resolutions. 7A, Madam Clerk.
Working on it.
A resolution
And-
authorizing the mayor to enter into and execute a real estate purchase and option agreement relative to the purchase of lots 1, 2B, and option to purchase lot 2A located at the Enterprise South Industrial Park, and authorize the mayor to execute a deed and other necessary closing documents conveying said property to the purchaser listed here and below upon payment of the sale price by the purchaser.
Okay. Any questions or comments? Very well. 7B, please.
A resolution authorizing the administrator for the Department of Economic and Community Development to award home program funds to Habitat for Humanity of Greater Chattanooga for the purpose of creating 2 affordable housing units located at 313 West 37th Street and 3329 Hughes Avenue for a total amount not to exceed $80,000.
Okay.
I'm good, Mr.
Yep.
Chair. We've discussed this for the past couple of weeks, and I'm not aware of any questions my colleagues may have, but now's
Very
the
well.
time.
I see no hands, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
All right. 7C, please.
A resolution authorizing the mayor or his designee to enter into amendment number 1 to lease in substantially the form attached with Chattanooga Goodwill Industries Incorporated to amend the renewal options to 1 additional term beginning October 10th, 2020 and ending April 30th, 2021.
Okay, questions or comments? Councilwoman Coonrod.
Thank you, Chair. I'm concerned about, where this Goodwill industry will be relocating to, if they're even able to afford any lease with private people. But I want to know, do we have any city-owned buildings that they can relocate to? Or if they can do a shared agreement with the Bessie, since they have that downstairs space. Because they offer us, when you think about the furniture bank, when you think about the Forgotten Child Fund and the different things that they do, devote rehab kids that come help out as well, is that the services are needed. And I most definitely wouldn't, the AIM Center project is a great project as well, but they're still trying to secure the funding for the project. Are we able to extend this lease out past April, depending on their ability to gain any funds for it? Can we, they stay there until they're ready to break ground? Have we looked at other options?
Tell you what, Miss Lydia, bring Miss Sullivan back in for just a moment, please.
Yes, sir.
Hey, Miss Sullivan.
Hello, Chair.
I've got a question. Councilwoman Coonrod's brought up a great point. I was wondering maybe in our next strategic planning in October, if we could have an update on kind of what's happening with the furniture bank, or the Goodwill Industries.
Yes.
Just to kind of give us a update on what is occurring, what's been going on, what it looks like they're going to be able to do as far as relocate.
We will do it. Our ECD department, as well as Tyler Yunt in the mayor's office. So between Richard Beeland and Tyler Yunt, we've had a lot of discussions with Forgotten Child Fund and with the Furniture Bank. And we will be glad to bring y'all a report and update on that at strategic planning.
Okay. Madam Clerk, would you put that on our strategic planning agenda for our first meeting in October?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Sullivan. Will that be good, Councilwoman Coonrod?
That'll be fine, but I'd like to also add, there's a building that we own, the city own, that's on Glass Street, that I think would be big enough to house them. So if you are, and it's just sitting there, it's an eyesore in my community. If we can put that building to use, it'll be perfect.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Ms. Sullivan.
Thank you.
All right, Madam Clerk, let's read 7D, please.
Okay. A resolution authorizing the mayor to accept $721,031 in Housing and Urban Development Community Development Block Grant Disaster Relief Funds to aid in the recovery and cleanup costs associated with the April 2020 tornado damage.
Okay, and I did add this by permission just yesterday. Ms. Williams, I see Ms. Williams in attendance. Would you bring her in so she could explain maybe what has transpired? I mean, this is some really good news. It's going to be, I think, some great help that's needed, but we had to move rather quickly.
Yes, sir.
Hi, Ms. Williams.
Good afternoon,
Could
Chairman.
you just explain a little bit for us about how this came about and why we had to move so quickly?
Absolutely. This money, $721,000 and some change, was money that, to use a HUD word, was recaptured CDBG funds, and that basically means that there were other recipients of past CDBG allocations that either did not use the money that they were allocated, or they misused the money that they were allocated, and HUD did not reimburse them.
Okay.
So as you all are well aware, I believe the end of the federal fiscal year is September 30. So rightfully so, they are sweeping accounts. And so we were able to end up with $721,000, I think is $31, for CDBG-DR. DR is a coding for disaster relief. We've never received this money before. The city of Chattanooga has never received DR money in the past. So yesterday at 2:38, we received an email from HUD saying that if we could get the agreement signed by Thursday the 24th by the mayor, then they would be able to allocate those funds to us this fiscal year, meaning by September 30. So we're super happy about that. And they are funds that follow the regular CDBG guidelines, and the one that's most relevant and easiest to explain is that the recipients of the funds must be their household at 80% of the area median income or below. So 80% of AMI or below is the household income level for recipients. And this money is to be used, can be used countywide. So all of Hamilton County is eligible to receive CDBG DR money as a result of the president declaring us a national disaster area.
Okay.
Back in, as a result of the weather in the spring.
Thank you, ma'am. I do have a question by Councilman Ledford.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hi, Don. I was excited to hear
Hello.
about this yesterday as well during a late Zoom meeting with some of the staff. My question is, when you mentioned the county, these funds are applicable to city and county. Are they going to be split in any way with the county, or what action is required on the county's part in order for us to secure this? Because I know we've only have a few days to formulate a plan and I think make an amendment to our action plan.
Well, ordinarily, that's exactly what would happen. But our HUD folks have said, we know we're doing this out of order because they're trying to move the money by September 30 to allocate it for this fiscal year. Mm-hmm. So their communication to us was, the good news is you have access to this money. The bad news is we need your mayor to sign it and get it back to us by September 24th, so we can get it in the September 30 fiscal year end. And ordinarily, you're right, Councilman, we would be writing a plan that they would approve. But given the circumstances, they said, we'll give you the money and we'll work together, HUD and the city, on the actual plan.
Okay, so we have some grace applied here from them.
Yes, sir. We just will let them know what we would like the funds to be used for, of course, in accordance to CDBG guidelines. We're also hoping that there will be some waivers given the nature of the money and the nature of our needs, but we won't know that for probably a couple of weeks.
Great. Well, I know there's some areas outside of East Brainerd, obviously, that the tornado affected, and I would love to sit down and maybe Councilwoman Coonrod and Dr. Burson sit down with you or Zoom in, whatever we want to do to see how we might be able to help identify some good use for those funds. And that's really good news. Thanks, Donna.
Sure. So what Sandra Gober and I are working on is a checklist, so everybody will know what are allowable uses for CDBG.
Right.
And of course, the recipients have to be 80% of the AMI, and then anybody that meets those eligibility and they're a Hamilton County resident, they are eligible.
That's good. Great news. Thank you so much. Thank you,
You're
Chairman.
welcome.
All right, Councilwoman Coonrod.
Thank you, Chair. And Donna, she asked my questions about, I needed to know, like, is there a list of what the money can be spent on? So you all are working on that, and I'd love to see that. Now, if it's a county resident that reach out to us, do we direct them to ECD, or we send them back to the county to go through their process?
No, anybody that's interested in CDBG funds, as always, would be directed to us.
Look at it.
Yes,
Okay,
ma'am.
thank you. I was excited when, I read the email about it. I know Councilman Ledford, he's most definitely been advocating for it. And the first thing came to mind, I was like, boy, Ledford moved fast. He need to connect me to Ben Carson. Dang, it was just that quick.
I like
Well,
Ben.
yeah,
I like Ben.
we're very fortunate to to find ourselves in this situation. As Knoxville got some of the money. This city has been very responsible with the CDBG funds, and we've demonstrated start to finish application to compliance, that we take the allocation of our money seriously and that we manage it, and somebody from HUD can come in here and go through our files, and we feel confident that we will pass the test. And one of those reasons is because we follow the rules. So we follow the rules, and when you follow the rules, the chances of you getting in trouble are very slim with HUD. So we're very grateful.
Thank you, Ms. Donna, for all you do. Appreciate it.
All right, any other questions for Ms. Williams? If not, Ms. Lydia, you can excuse her. Thank you, Ms. Williams. Okay, moving on now to some short-term vacation rental applications. Looks like both of them's in District 9. Let's read them for the record, Madam Clerk. Do what? I say District 7. Thank you.
Put no more in my district now.
District 7.
A resolution approving short-term vacation rental application number 20 STVR 00094 for property located at 62 East 17th Street.
Go ahead.
Yeah,
Let's
yeah,
go ahead and read
Council,
out, and we'll take both of them at the same time, Councilman.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
A resolution approving short-term vacation rental application number 20 STVR 00103 for property located at 74 East 17th Street.
All right, Councilman.
Yeah, I will be addressing both of those at our 6 o'clock meeting, Council. So.
Okay. Very well. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's move to 7G under Finance, Madam Clerk.
A resolution to accept the current year financial report from the Chattanooga Business Improvement District and approve the proposed budget for fiscal year 2021 activities, including authorizing the interim treasurer to collect a special assessment fee for tax year 2020.
Councilman Ledford.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Lydia, can you see if Mr. Hunt is out there?
He is, sir.
Steve Hunt?
You just go ahead and bring Mr. Hunt in, Ms. Lydia.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have two questions, one for the city attorney. I read in the paper last week where the board had amended their budget. And so my question is one of process. Does that amended version, is a version that we have not seen as a council, does it need to be added to this as an amended version? That would be a question for you.
Yes, sir. At least you need to have the current year financial report added here, if that be an issue on there. The version that we have at least connected with your packet here today looks like it was dated September 4th. I'm not sure if there's been any amendment recently.
Okay, well, I'll let Mr. Hunt, if he doesn't mind. I think they met and amended their version. I wanted to make sure that we understood which one. And then the second part of that question is, I think there's a letter that went out from Mr. Hunt that addresses some concerns that council had, and I think they've been addressed, Mr. Hunt. But I'll let you have the floor and address that letter you sent out to us, sir.
Thank you, Councilman. Council members, thank you for the time today. On the first matter, it was my screw up, actually, that we, in our board meeting on September the 16th last week, we, at the advice of our finance committee, thought it was prudent to have an operating reserve so that in the years that we go forward, we might have a deficit budget. We are proposing a deficit budget for 2021. The reason that we can do that is twofold. One, in 2020, we have our a Lyndhurst grant that we will not have again in the future. We had the city treasurer that began collecting the assessments for October, November, and December for 2019 was paid to us in 2020. So we have a extra little bit of money that we wouldn't ordinarily have in a calendar year. And then our expenses were down primarily because of COVID. We could not open an office nor hire ambassadors due to COVID in March or April as we had intended, but we were able to do that in August the 1st. So for those reasons, this year we had a surplus. It is not our intention to operate with a surplus. So our treasurer recommended that we set aside an operating reserve for future years. And so the board, our board, the Alliance board, voted last Wednesday to include that in our 2021 budget. So we'll have an operating reserve of $230,000 in our 2021 budget. And that did not appear in the material that we had reviewed with you previously. And that is my fault. And I apologize to the council for that. I'll pause there and ask if there are any questions on that budget and before moving on to the nonprofit conversation.
Sure. Mr. Chairman, if I may follow up with that.
Go ahead.
This is for the city attorney. Bill, do we need to have an alternate version added as an amendment in order to accept their amended budget on tonight's reading?
We need to have some recognition that that has been provided to you if you're approving that for fiscal year 2021. That's the only concern about that. My other concern in this is that we also need to authorize the interim treasurer to collect the special assessment if you're going to do that pretty quickly, because the billing goes out on October the 1st, which this would be included on. So that's one concern about that.
So let me rewind and cast that line back out.
All right.
Do we have an alternate version that needs to, does the alternate version need to be on our agenda as an alternate version, or can it be added by an amendment to tonight's item? That's what I'm trying to.
As long as we have the proposed budget for fiscal year 2021 activities occurring, yes, it can be added. It just needs to be the correct version.
Okay, how do we label that new version to make sure that that is a version that is to be voted on versus the original budget that we discussed and was presented to us?
We would simply say the proposed budget for fiscal year 2021 activities dated, whichever date it is, if it's a recent date.
Okay, so that would be made in the form of a motion tonight. Okay.
Yes.
All right, so everybody got that?
Yep.
Yeah, I got it.
All right, very good, very good.
How will I receive a copy of that proposed budget?
Very good. I was going to ask Mr. Hunt to follow up on the letter that was sent out, but I'd like to yield to my colleague, Dr. Burrs. I see her hand first.
Mr. Hunt, what date was the budget amended?
We voted on that at our September 16th board meeting, Chairman.
Okay, so that amended budget needs to have the date of 9/16, Mr. Attorney.
Right, sir.
Okay, Councilwoman Burrs.
Yeah, this is just a question of, I guess, protocol here. Steve, did you say you have a deficit? Tell me your budget. Did you use the word deficit budget?
Yes, ma'am. And the information we presented to the council a couple of weeks ago, our proposed budget for 2021 shows an operating deficit of about $13,000 and some change. And I think that is because we have a few grant opportunities that are unknown right now. And we are projecting to operate 2021 at a $13,000 deficit.
Okay, so here's where I'm going with this. Is this with your original budget or with the budget that apparently we're going to modify and put on the agenda tonight? Which budget is deficit?
So let me clarify from the
Let me tell you where I'm going. Leah, let me tell you where I'm going with this. I'm not sure we can approve a deficit budget.
No, ma'am.
All right. So here's my question. And this is, thank you, Darren. This is kind of news to me. Was your original budget that we approved, I didn't see that as being a deficit budget. I saw it as a balanced budget, right? And then subsequent to that, you came up with another budget that's putting some money aside. I get that. So in turn, the budget becomes a deficit budget, and I'm not sure we can approve a deficit budget. That's my question.
Yes, ma'am. So I may be not using the proper terminology, but in our 2020 forecast that we presented to the council along with the 2021 budget, we had we called a fund balance of $620,000 and $620,599. And so that is in the bank. And so we start out 2021 with that, but not from an operating standpoint. From an operating standpoint, we look at the assessment and any contributed support, such as a grant, and get a total revenue for our projected 2021 of $892,800. Operating expenses are projected to be $924,000. And so the operating budget is a deficit, but with then we have capital expenditures and that fund balance carryover. Our goal will be to zero out our budget so that we are representing the property owner's best interest every year. So therefore, simply taking that cash reserve and not calling it a fund balance, but showing that on our budget so that we have that rainy day fund, much like the city and the county have their rainy day fund.
Okay, I got it. Is there any way that you can come? I'm not sure, and Phil, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I think the money's all there. I'm not sure we can approve a deficit budget. Do you have an answer for that?
Does Phil have an answer in that regard? The answer is that the funding is an amount that is set aside and is to be approved for a specific amount for each property. The amount was set out in our ordinance to result in a $1 million amount. That was the amount that it was based upon, and that is available for the year. Unless you change the amount of that, I think you can go the way that it was originally here because it's not changing the number that is in the ordinance. If you change that amount for the allocation for each property, then that requires additional action by this body on the budget.
Okay, so let me ask it one more time. In order that what we're doing is proper,
sure,
just yes or no, can we approve a deficit budget?
You can approve the proposed budget for fiscal year 2021 activities, and that is what has been requested by the CBID board.
Even though it's a deficit budget?
Yes, ma'am, because that body was created to be able to provide the benefits at the rate of money of a $1 million amount last year in your ordinance. You're not changing your ordinance amount. You're simply reviewing the proposals that they have for the coming year. You're trying to establish, is that something appropriate? And they are not asking for an increased amount in the budget ordinance.
So you're saying all we're doing is saying, so all we're doing is approving go forward with this $1 million, even
Right.
though that could be an illusion because they've not brought that in. And I wasn't concerned about that. It was the fact that our budget can't be deficit, can we approve somebody else's?
And all you're doing each year is you're accepting the report and you're approving the proposed budget under the statute here. And you're not increasing that amount this year. If there was some reason to consider an increase, no, I would not say you could do that at all.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am. And one of the other important issues while you're thinking about that is there's going to have to be some sort of bill that goes out to collect that, and there has to be authorization to collect that by the treasurer's office, and that is the concern as to whether it gets done between now and October 1st.
Okay, let me go to Councilman Gilbert. He hasn't weighed in on this particular item. Councilman Gilbert.
Real briefly, Mr. Hunt, explain to me more about the operational reserve.
Yes, sir. Councilman Gilbert, our treasurer is Gordon Stalins. He's the chief financial officer at the Tennessee Aquarium and the Creative Discovery Museum. He's used to working on budgets like this, and he, in reviewing it with the finance committee, has and because of the items that I mentioned previously, the more money coming in from 2019 carrying into 2020, and our the expenses being far less than we had projected, then he has determined that it would be prudent and fiscally conservative for us to set aside that cash reserve in case something were to happen, or in case a capital project were to come up. Maybe there's art in the district that needs to be funded. Maybe there's animation in the district that needs to be funded. So the council would have the right to, as you do currently, review and approve our operating budget every year.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Councilman Ledford, is that a new hand?
Yes, sir. It's going to go on to the letter that we received, but on this note, this is for Phil.
Yes.
Phil, we have in the language the word approve. Can we just simply not change that word to accept, because this isn't our budget?
That is correct. It says under section 11.532 in the budget, annual budget, is that the annual budget will include a projection of revenues from the special assessment, which is the $1 million amount that has already been approved by the city council, and a projection of expenditure for projects, services, and activities of the CBID board. And it says the annual budget shall be reviewed and approved by the city council, or if not approved, shall be returned to the CBID board for revision and resubmission until the city council shall approve the annual budget. So that's what it says each time.
Okay, so approve stays. Got it.
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you. If I can move on to the letter that Mr. Hunt sent out this afternoon, I think addresses some concerns I know I personally had, and I would like, if you would please follow up on that.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Councilman Ledford. Truly, when I reported to the council previously, the calendar has kept us from and COVID has kept us from getting face-to-face with these nonprofits. So with their board and their vestry and elders and however they're configured, and with our finance committee and our executive committee and our board, we have not been able to get together. But recently, the finance committee has agreed that they would accept the last proposal from those nonprofits. So, and in the exchange that has started, I suppose, back from when the original assessments went out, the dialogue began, and the ordinance allows that the Alliance Board work with each of the nonprofits annually, and we have been doing that since inception. And so recently, our finance committee has agreed to accept the nonprofit's last proposal. And I think any time that one party accepts the other's last proposal, you should have a deal. We have not heard back from them, to my knowledge, that is accepted, but I can't imagine why they wouldn't just thank us for accepting their last proposal. And so I intend to have that voted on officially in finance, then to exec, and then to our board meeting.
Oh, okay. So our concern, or my concern, I can only speak for myself when we were talking through this in the beginning, was the exemptions of nonprofits and our religious institutions. So you have accepted their offer in which they feel they can participate in, and you have put that in writing to us today as a pledge to make sure that that happens at your next financial meeting.
Yes, sir. That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
that's
sir.
all I have on that subject.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Hunt before we excuse him? Okay. I see no other hands. Thank you, Mr. Hunt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Miss Lydia, you can excuse Mr. Hunt. Now, moving on to 7H, please.
A resolution authorizing the appointments of Brandon Guerrero and Corey E. Dent as special police officers unarmed for the McCamey Animal Center to do special duties as prescribed herein, subject to certain conditions.
Questions or comments? Not, moving on. Councilman Mitchell, I wasn't present last week during agenda session. Did you cover the items under Public Works and Transportation in committee?
Yes, sir, we did. And unless there's specific questions about the individual items, I would suggest we move on to still a departmental report and a committee meeting.
All right, very well. I'm going to move the departmental report to the end of future considerations. And Madam Clerk, if you would make that note, I really think that's where this should fall in our agenda so that we can, as a council, continue to work through these items. So council, at this time, if you would pull up your purchases for the evening and look those over and let me know if you have any questions or concerns about purchases this afternoon. I'll give you just a minute. Okay, I'm seeing no hands at this time. So we will move on to our September the 29th agenda. Any questions, concerns about next week's agenda? Councilman Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I want to go to 6A on next week's agenda, the short-term vacation rental ordinance.
Okay.
Phil, were you going to send us out a red line that showed the changes in Councilperson Coonrod's version?
Yes, sir. Have done it.
You sent it?
Yes, sir. I made sure I sent it again twice this afternoon to your account right before the meeting started again.
But, okay, well, I probably hadn't looked at it if it was right before the meeting started. Okay.
Yeah, right before the meeting today.
Well, I was kind of wondering, I mean, it got on next week's agenda, and we haven't even had a discussion or, I guess, Mr. Chair, I know that usually our process would go, I know there's ways around this, but usually our process would go, this piece of legislation would go into committee. And I was wondering, of course, you weren't here last week, but I'm looking for a discussion. I think I was quoted last week saying that I'm looking forward to the discussion. I'm just wondering when the discussion is going to take place before it comes before us to vote.
So our process is when a council person has legislation that it should come before or come through a committee hearing or meeting first, or two council persons can put it on the agenda. And after I saw the agenda, and since I wasn't present last week, I assumed that Councilwoman Coonrod and Councilwoman Burrs had placed it on the agenda. Personally, I would like to see it brought through committee. I myself have questions about it. I worked with the state very diligently on this piece of legislation, and I think if we want to start bringing the state down on us to the point that we don't get to regulate our short-term vacation rentals as we do now, and many of you don't have them in your district, I think if we want to get the state involved, the best way to do that is to start banning some of these short-term vacation rentals. So I myself have a lot of some real concerns about it. I would ask Councilman Oglesby, sir, if you could have this in committee.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'll be happy to. I'll get, is there any specific, because we're on this subject now, how soon would you like to see it on committee? I can do it as early as next week if the council so pleases.
If you can line it up, I think we probably need to get some staff involved. There's probably questions about density maps where we have non-owner occupied short-term vacation rentals presently in the city. If staff could, I think, present that to us next week would be in order.
Okay, I'll start working on it first thing in the morning, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Okay, Councilman Mitchell, anything further before I go on to
Thank you,
Councilwoman Coonrod? All right, Councilwoman Coonrod.
Thank you, Chair. Because yes, Mitchell and I been going back and forth with Donna on some emails. So I was gonna bring up that if we could remove it off the here at our 6 o'clock meeting for next week to put it on the following week after we've had discussion and see, any additional questions. That's why I asked if we had, but you weren't here at that time. So we can kind of figure it out. The state, that's just another excuse. But what we always use it for whenever we feel like, well, we don't want to go a particular way. And I'm cool with that too. But if the state have anything to say about Chattanooga amending any ordinances, they will have to be on Nashville and everybody else that they've allowed to ban. So surely we're not afraid of the state. They need to do their job.
Oh, believe me.
Yeah.
I was there when Nashville was there as well.
Yeah. So we're not scared of them.
Yeah. Okay. Councilwoman Burrs.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I think there's some confusion here. I told Councilwoman Coonrod that I was supportive of going forward with this. I was surprised to find myself as a co-chair, as were some of my colleagues. And Councilwoman Coonrod, I started to tell you earlier, I apologize for forwarding all kinds of things to you, but I started getting all these questions about this thing, and I wasn't sure why until I saw myself listed as a co-chair of this.
Co-sponsor.
Co-sponsor, yeah. And so I think it's just a big confusion. I'm not. And I think we should have the valid, good discussion that she talked about. I'm not particularly scared of the state one way or the other, but I think we need to get it right here. And so I go for the discussion next week, please.
Okay, our normal process would be to bring it through committee, and then after committee, it would be put on the 2-week agenda.
That's cool with me. Yeah, I'm cool with what you're doing. I'm just not a co-sponsor. I didn't want you to think that. I'm agreeing with her. I'm just saying, I want, number one, I'm not a co-sponsor. That's an error. And number two, I think we should be in committee next week.
Okay.
Yeah, I have no problem with that. When you said it last week, I knew what you meant.
Yeah,
that you're going to be a discussion because that's just,
I don't even have it in my district. She's the expert and I'm not.
Okay, Madam Clerk, would you take Councilwoman Burrs off as a sponsor? And we will have it in committee next week by chaired by Councilman Oglesby. All right.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Can we have it removed off the agenda to after we have the discussion, or do we need to?
Mr. Attorney?
I will take it off if you want to put it on for 2 weeks after your public hearing next week or your meeting next week.
Well, let's address that after the meeting or at the conclusion of committee.
Yes.
Just for right now, just take it off. Okay. Any other questions or concerns about next week's agenda? Councilwoman Burrs, is that a new hand?
Oh, sorry, sir. No, old hand.
All right. Councilwoman Coonrod?
I did. Yes, that's a new hand with the, because I had time to go look at the purchasing, And I have a question that we brought up, Russell and I brought up last year about the janitorial services, and not particular for the fire department janitorial service, but the cleaning of our buildings and, you know, across the street, the different ones. And we were told then that they wanted to bid that service out because we didn't have enough staff to do the work that was needed to be done. And Russell brought up, well, hey, let's reclassify what the role of the job is. And we were supposed to be gotten back to, and we never did get back to that particular subject. Well, they've now contracted that service out. That's in the process of being bidded on now. And I just want to know, how is that possible when we asked specifically as a council for something to be done and it wasn't done, and then you just still want to outsource it out?
Would you like for me to bring someone in?
Yes.
Who would you like?
Whoever can answer that question, because we never received the information that we asked for.
Well, I'm going to pick on Miss Sullivan, and maybe she can direct me to the appropriate place. Miss Lydia, would you bring in Mara, please?
Yes, sir.
Hello.
Hey, Miss Sullivan.
Hello, sir.
Did you hear Councilwoman Coonrod's question?
I did. Yes, sir. Councilwoman, we have several different departments have their own janitorial service contracts, YFD, police, fire, et cetera. So the one that y'all were asking us to not do a contract out for was for the Wellness Center, because that would have been a new contract, and we were going to be doing, you had asked us to do some additional employment for and change the description of the employment for the folks who are cleaning the downtown offices, the downtown campus offices. So I know that sounds like I'm parsing words, but I'm not trying to. It's just that fire has always had their janitorial service contracted out. So it's not that we are doing anything different than we did before.
Right. I know they've always been contracted out. Like, I want to know why we haven't received the information about the outsourcing that you all have just bidded for the cleaning of the downtown offices, because there's several companies that have bidded on it, and we specifically asked that it not be outsourced.
Okay. I think that I need Justin Holland to help me with that question. I'm sorry.
Councilwoman Coonrod, let me ask you this, since I don't think what you're asking is on our agenda or on the purchases for tonight. Could
No.
we look at that? Could we look at that also in strategic planning?
Oh, sure.
No, actually, they could just get back with me before then. It don't have to be
Okay.
in our strategic planning meeting.
Yeah.
But
Ms. Sullivan,
the fire station uniforms, is this the second set of turnouts? Is that what this one is?
It may be part of that. I mean, we have second sets and first sets are just a general part, thankfully, of what we do now, thanks to all of y'all's hard work on helping us get to that point. So we're not just doing second sets and first sets anymore.
Okay.
So it's just a replenishment of the whole package now. So,
okay, great.
Thankfully. Thanks.
okay, we good? Ms. Sullivan, if you would get back with Ms. Coonrod.
Absolutely, will do. Thank you.
Wellness Center, thank you. All right. All right, let's go back. We were on next week's agenda. I don't think I saw any other hands.
There's a hand up, sir.
Oh, okay. I'm looking at the wrong screen, sir. Councilman Gilbert.
I'd like to hear about it more at the next week meeting about the what this councilwoman brought up about the custodians.
Okay, that'd be at our October strategic planning. It'd be October 6th, sir.
Okay.
All right, Miss Lydia, would you put that on there as well?
Yes, sir.
Our strategic planning agenda.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
I believe we will have a strategic planning meeting September 29th.
That is,
Be
that,
2 weeks.
that's a fifth, I mean, that's a fifth Tuesday. Is that what we're doing?
So we're not going, we're going to go back. We're just going to stay with first and thirds from now on.
Yeah.
Okay.
First and third.
I am fine. Thank you.
Good. Okay. Let me get back into my agenda. Okay, future considerations. If you would, council, pull up your future considerations and see if you have any questions concerning our look ahead. Okay, I'm seeing no hands at this time. All right, if not, we will, got one, Councilwoman Coonrod.
Yeah, thank you. Is Blythe on the call?
In fact, I was just getting ready to look for him to see if
There you go.
he is. You want to go ahead and bring him in? Councilwoman?
Thank you. Hey, Blythe, I see we're renewing the contract for Bike Chattanooga operations. So is that like dealing with the bike lanes, bike racks and that kind of thing, or what exactly is it? You muted.
You'll have to unmute your mic, Mr. Bailey.
I'm sorry, and I'm so dark on this camera you can't make out you can't read my lips. But yes, Councilwoman, that's our no cost to the city operator for our public bike share system. Shift Transit has been operating that system, I think, now for 3 years, and this is for a renewal to keep them operating. And again, it doesn't cost the city anything, and they've done a great job.
And so it's for the bike operator. Now, how can we expand those services into other areas, like on the other side of the Missionary Ridge Tunnel or the Wilcox Tunnel?
We have tried to expand that system, and I know you've asked that question before, Councilwoman, because they operate our system. There are capital costs to expansion that need to be offset by operating costs, but we've always been favorable to putting bike share systems farther out so they're more accessible to neighborhoods. I'd be happy to talk with you about where you might have an interest in putting them, and we can see with our operator if there's a possibility that we could expand.
All right, thank you, Blythe. Appreciate it.
Mr. Bailey, we're going right into departmental reports, and I have one by CDOT.
Yes, sir, and I'm glad to. I know y'all are running late, and I will get straight to it. Kevin Comstock is our director at Smart Cities. I can see he's been loaded onto the Zoom now. We're doing a couple of partnerships with UTC, and we've invited them to give a presentation on the work that they're doing. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Kevin, who has Mina, Professor Sartipi with him, and they're going to provide the departmental report today.
All right, great.
Thank you for having us. Assume you can all hear me fine.
We can. Go ahead, sir.
We've, for 3 years now, we've been, have established a Smart Cities division within the Department of Transportation. And during that time, we've had the opportunity to build a very unique relationship with the school, University of Tennessee at Chattanooga, where we've been doing a lot of good work, primarily from a safety perspective, understanding how pedestrians move in the corridor. But this work is continuing to grow and manifest out from that. And I'm sure you guys have seen some of the news reports on the work that the school is doing. And we just want to highlight a couple of projects that are coming up that we're getting ready to engage the school on for this coming fiscal year. So I'd like to introduce Mina Sartipi, the director of the Center for Urban Informatics and Progress at UTC. If she could, if she's ready, we'll get it.
Yes. Yes. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Mina Sartipi, and we are honored and excited to be here. We really appreciate City Council's time today. And I have two of my members here from UTC, that they are going to be presenting 2 of our projects. And as Kevin mentioned, these are projects that we are working very closely with the city on these. Briefly, before talking about the projects, I would like just to mention that COIP is a research center at UTC, but I want to mention that we do not do research for the sake of research. We really focus on questions and challenges that can directly or indirectly impact the citizens of Chattanooga, all of us. And we focus on data-driven approaches, which allow us to look at the data, understand really what is going on, and learn that to see what are the factors that can create a higher quality of life. And then we're looking to see how can we implement those for everyone. Without any more delay, I would like to ask Austin Harris to present the project that we are working on MLK Smart Corridor. And Austin is a testbed manager for the COIP at UTC.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for having us today. And I know we're running a little bit long, so I want to jump right into it. I'm going to present one of the projects, and Jeremy Rowland will come after. He will present the second one. Excuse me. I'm going to be speaking about our pedestrian analysis project. Sorry, there we go. So I'm going to jump right into the motivation. Year over year, the National Highway Traffic and Safety Administration has reported higher pedestrian injuries and fatalities. Hamilton County is ranked 3rd in Tennessee for pedestrian injury and fatalities, as well as pedal cyclists. These are accidents that are accidents that include motorized vehicles. Hamilton County ranks just below Shelby and Davidson County in Tennessee. We believe that we can develop systems that will help us collect data that will enable us to make better decisions and improve the safety of intersections as well as crosswalks. To do that, we need to answer some questions. And the first one is, how do we collect the actionable data that will allow us to assess and evaluate the intersections and crosswalks? It will allow us to improve the understanding of pedestrian environments. How are pedestrians utilizing a given crosswalk? What are their wait times? How are they interacting with the current infrastructure that's out there? For example, the push buttons. That will also allow us to identify high-risk crosswalks and known crossings. At the Center for Urban Informatics and Progress and on the MLK Smart Corridor or the MLK Testbed, we have worked on some of the pedestrian safety analysis previously. We have done that through computer vision. We have cameras out on the corridor. I'm going to show you a quick video here. I'll tell you a little bit what's going on. Hopefully some of you have seen this intersection. This is right at MLK in Georgia. And this is the type of data that we collect currently. We collect the movement. We collect the path, and then we do prediction on the trajectory. And the reason we do that is we calculate something called time till collision, which helps us identify near-miss incidents between motorized vehicles or bicyclists and pedestrians. However, there is a challenge getting accurate data for near-miss incidents, and that's because of the three-dimensional aspect that we cannot get from a 2D video. So the system that we're proposing in this project utilizes LiDAR sensing. This is an example video that I'm going to show. On the left-hand side is a very high-up view of a LiDAR data stream, and the lines you see are people walking around. The right side is an example heat map, but this is the type of granular data that we'll get from a LiDAR, and we'll be able to basically evaluate the costs of the system versus cameras and the performance. We have a partner that's committed to providing just over $80,000 in LiDAR systems to support this project. These LiDARs, this is where we currently have them deployed at MLK in Georgia and MLK in Market. one or two at each intersection. That way we can cover, all the crosswalks within this domain here. So a quick summary of the project is to develop a system that allows us to collect and analyze pedestrian data, as well as vehicular and bicyclist data. We're going to analyze it, look for near miss incidents, looks at activity, collect signal information for like pedestrian crosswalk signals, evaluate if people are using them the way they should be, are they crossing at the right times, and then generate reports where we can share that with CDOT, where we can take action to improve the safety of those intersections and crosswalks. That concludes my presentation. I think, is Jeremy in here? I'll go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I think we have you, Jeremy. And I think we can do maybe questions if everybody's okay with that at the end of Jeremy's for both of the presentations.
Okay, go ahead.
All right, so next slide, Austin. I'll just go ahead and start right off the bat. I won't go too into detail, but these numbers really speak for themselves. Vehicular crashes in terms of injuries and property damage are far, far too high. And one of the biggest challenges that a lot of people face are the monetary costs behind these crashes. Next slide. And the second, second slide. There we go. The second, arguably more crucial societal cost is the human life cost behind these vehicular crashes. Obviously, as each year goes by, the roadways get more dangerous. And in Hamilton County alone, just in 2019, there were 56 reported crashes, and 36 of those crashes were in Chattanooga, which is just outright unacceptable. Something needs to be done about that to make this place safer. In fact, Hamilton County in 2019 was ranked highest for death toll in the 12-county Southeast region in Tennessee last year. So things that come to mind are, how can we remedy this issue and what can be done about it? Next slide. One of the best things we can do to learn about anything is see where are patterns and trends. And this graph, probably one of our more popular graphs that most people like, shows that there are trends that we can see. As you can see, crashes start around 6 or 7 o'clock when people are going to work, and they increase significantly in the later hours of the day when people are leaving work, going home. And you can even see on the blue line on Fridays, those crashes are occurring slightly earlier in the day because it's Friday, people want to go home early. So what this really tells us is, yes, there are trends and patterns in these crashes that we can see, and from that, we are able to learn the causes, or at the very least, the significantly important factors at play during these crashes. Next slide. And from that, we have created a predictive model that can tell us where these accidents are most likely to happen. So as you can see, the shaded or the colored hexagons on the screen here are where our model is saying accidents are most likely to occur on January 23rd, 2020. And all of these black shapes you see, that you're seeing are those accidents. So we can confidently say that our predictive algorithm can see where these crashes are taking place on a given day. And just as a side note, this prediction for January 23rd was performed on January 22nd. So the idea is to provide this as a live service model for local law enforcement and emergency services. Next slide. And the reason we want to provide this model to first responders is because there are a lot of issues that these first responders sort of face when they are responding to these crashes, such as well, it's not something they particularly face, but there's often issues with recording where these crashes are happening, which can make it difficult to actually create this model, which is something we had to deal with. So we went through the data, got rid of any sort of outlying crashes to actually make this model. And what it can really provide these first responders is shorter response times. They can get to these crashes sooner, help these people sooner, and ideally reduce the amount of damage that is done to an individual. So obviously, the longer it takes for an emergency responder to respond to a crash, it's going to increase the amount of damage that is done in terms of mortality. And it was found that the first 5 minutes are the most crucial. So the shorter we can get the response times for these emergency responders, the better. And it was also found that, as one would expect, the longer these response times, the longer that these people who are involved in these crashes will spend recovering, which can lead to extended hospital stays, more complex treatment being necessary, increased hospital bills. Obviously, no one likes to overpay on anything. Next slide. And taking this one step further, apart from just crash prediction, we can do infrastructural adjustments. So as you can see, there was a very high concentration of crashes in this particular section of Chattanooga. So we looked into it and saw that people were essentially, for whatever reason, maybe they just weren't paying attention enough and they were driving a little too close to the sideway and they were hitting this pole, as you can see on the top of this, on the top picture here. So we found that there had been significant amounts of crashes because of this. And what had happened is we reached out to CDOT and they reached out to the owners of the pole, and the pole was moved to a safer location so these distracted drivers who may not be paying as much attention as they should or just driving too close to the curb wouldn't hit that pole as frequently. And since the pole has been moved, there have been no crashes due to that pole there. So obviously, that's a pretty good thing. Next slide. In short, crash prediction to assist law enforcement and emergency services to better allocate their resources for better and more efficient distribution of those resources to ideally reduce the amount of time it would take them to get to the locations of these crashes and potentially even be at the site of these crashes. So people will just instinctually drive slower because, as I'm sure we all know, even just seeing a police officer will make you drive slower, even if you're driving perfectly safely. And taking, as I mentioned again, just one step further, the prescriptive analysis where we find these isolated parts of the city where some sort of infrastructural adjustment could be made to make these roadways safer for drivers and pedestrians alike. And that's it for me. Thank you.
All right. Blythe?
Yes, sir. That concludes our presentation. I will say in closing, we've done quite a bit of work with Dr. Sartucci for many years, and our smart city division. I'm always impressed with the level of analysis that they can provide. I met Austin a year or so ago at a conference in Chattanooga, and the work that they do at UTC and for the city is invaluable. So I really appreciate them putting the work that they're doing and also putting the time forward to present this to you all today.
Hey, Blythe, I was noticing on the infrastructure adjustment slide that they had up, it looked like there were maps that kind of heat sensors where I guess maybe frequent crashes. Do we have those available to where we could see where crashes are occurring in Chattanooga on a regular basis?
Kevin or Mina, can you address that question?
Yes, as a matter of fact, we're working with the Open Data and Performance Measurements group right now.
Okay.
To extract a good bit of that data from the crash records and looking at each individual street as we start to look at this. We all know that every Friday on 24, we're going to have some sort of crash that's going to impact traffic. We could almost put that in the bank. But on the surface streets, the ones that Chattanooga actually has jurisdiction over and control, we could do the same thing on our streets. And it is much more granular from that end to understand what the roadway looks like and if there are other impacts that are affecting the crash numbers. So yes, we are in the process of building that very project right now.
Okay, great. Blythe, I'd be interested in seeing the results of the project.
Sure.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much, Blythe.
Thank you, Council, and thank you, Mina and Austin and Jeremy and Kevin.
All right.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Coonrod, I see your hand. Is that a new hand or? No? Okay, old hand. Okay. All right, Ms. Liddy, you can excuse our guest. And is there any other business that needs to come before the council during this agenda session before we move into legislative committee? If not, Vice Chair, the chair is yours, sir, and take us to legislative committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. All right, we'll call to order our legislative committee. Have a motion on the minutes?
So moved.
Have a second?
Second.
All right. Any opposed? Seeing none, minutes will stand as recorded. Today we've got a discussion on the tornado rebuilding relief legislation that Councilman Ledford has been working on. So at this time, I'll go ahead and turn it over to him to let him give just kind of a brief introduction and then allow for questions if there are any at this time. Councilman Ledford.
Thank you, Vice Chairman. I appreciate that very much. 2020 has been a very challenging year for all of us. And of course, the East Brainerd area, areas of District 6, areas of District 9 were touched by and ravaged by tornadoes, leaving devastating wake of destruction behind. So this resolution, before we start, Phil, I talked to you about this earlier today. And on advice of a very good friend of mine who I listen to very regularly and a very, very intelligent lady, pointed out to me that I would like to suggest before we read through this, that we remove the references to East Brainerd because the tornado didn't care one bit about which political district it sat down in. And I want to make sure that any area that was touched by the high winds and destruction of the tornado is encompassed into this resolution. So that means any area. So Phil, if you would, and when you're reading through this, Council, if you'll see and just imagine the words in the East Brainerd area removed to just reference the tornado damaged area, I think that will be something that I want to wrap my arms around for the entire city. So without further ado, this is basically just a resolution enacting legislation that's already on the books from a 2017 ordinance 13251 that basically provides a grandfather clause for those rebuilding back their structures that were damaged by the tornado into being able to build back the way they were without any additions to impervious areas such as parking lots, to build back under the same ordinance that they were originally built. And this also waives the building fees to help mitigate some of the financial loss and stress that has been placed on a lot of these organizations, nonprofits, religious institutions. And I wanted to add in there too that folks that were uninsured, I want to make sure that we try to wrap our arms around them and help them in addition. So that's basically what this is doing, is allowing them to rebuild back due to no fault of their own. This tornado is forcing them to do this. It's an undue hardship. And I think that this is just one way we can help the entire area devastated by the tornado, especially as you can tell from our previous conversation today. I'm very passionate about our nonprofits, very passionate about the work that our religious institutions, our churches do in our community. And I was just looking for ways to try to find a way to be helpful And I think that we can do this through this resolution, enacting a clause that it already is in place through ordinance 13251.
All right.
Phil, do you want anything to add?
Only thing to add, I think, on my end of it here is I have no problem with saying anywhere in the city that is affected by the issues of the tornado that occurred. I think that's a simple way of handling it. You do need some kind of list that would actually show which properties would be going to, just to make sure what the cost of this would be on your budget. So you need to have some idea, and I've put in the resolution here that there would be a list attached by the treasurer's office, at least indicating those nonprofits or other entities that might be subject to this relief.
So Phil, I appreciate you bringing that up. We talked about that before. So what I had experienced was, I think we can use is the incredible work that Mr. Moreland used in mapping their tornado area. I think that if we can cross-reference that to applicants who come for the relief, I think it's very simple to identify them, Phil. Using that map Mr. Moreland had so well executed and constructed.
If he can give us tax map parcels on there, that would really help in that regard. So
I have utmost faith in Mr. Moreland's ability to pretty much create any kind of data you want.
Okay, that'll give the treasurer something to look at whenever that's being requested, and you'll know. Fantastic.
And one other item, and I apologize for those of you with your hands up. I'm just trying to cover some bases here, as I've tried to cover as much as I can. The second part of that is with our uninsured homeowners or property owners. I think a simple affidavit sheet signing that is going to have to suffice from LDO's perspective, and I think that could be created through the city attorney's office rather quickly.
Sure.
Okay, thank you. And I do see some hands. Chairman, do you want me to kind of field the questions, or would you rather?
Let me get everybody set, and we'll see who the questions are for. Chairman Henderson.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Councilman Ledford, one of the things I had brought up when we kind of began talking about this earlier was making sure that any fee waiver or the stormwater, grandfathering the stormwater requirements would be for those buildings and developments that were basically rebuilding within the same footprint that existed prior to the tornado. I don't see that in this resolution, and I think that's something that probably needs to be added, is reference that that they would be building back the original footprint or structure.
So my response to that would be, that's a pretty rigid requirement, because you're not allowing them any fluctuation to make slight adjustments in their building. I think what we have covered, and what I think is important to note, is that they do not increase parking lot size or any impervious area. I think as long as we cover that portion of their building back, I would hate to restrict them from making needed improvements or a slight adjustment to their footprint. I mean, they may not build back exactly. They may build slightly bigger. I think the important thing to realize here when we talk about storm water is that they do not increase the impervious size of the area that they had before. And if they do that, then all the new regulations kick in. So it's really a parking lot.
Not increasing impervious area. I mean, I could go with that language as opposed to footprint.
Are we covered there, Phil?
I guess it would be hard to not create more impervious area and not stay within the footprint that they had. Or I don't know. Maybe they decrease the parking.
Well,
for a bigger building, but
sure.
But I think maybe wording along the lines of not increasing impervious surface would be suffice.
Phil, are we covered on that?
We currently have in the ordinance on here that to be eligible, they will redevelop under the regulations that existed as of 2014, provided that the properties do not increase the amount of impervious areas that existed on site as of April 12th, 2020. So there has to be the same site that was existing before the tornado damage occurred. Now, the danger about increasing the structure, though, if the structure gets bigger, the roof is a larger impervious area. So you have to be careful about that. That does create another area that has to be considered on where that drainage water goes.
Are you reading that from this resolution?
Yes, sir.
Bill,
It's version 4. Do you have 4 or not?
Do I have what?
Version 4. It's got MEMV4 at the bottom of it.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Maybe I didn't go far enough down.
Yeah, it's on the very last sentence.
Okay. Okay. I just didn't go far enough down. Okay. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
All right. You good, Chairman?
Yes. Thank you.
Councilman Mitchell.
Make sure I'm not muted. Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to give just a comment. When this was explained to us originally, it was to help nonprofits, religious, and educational institutions. I'm not going to go down this socioeconomic road, but I do wonder, making this available to non-insured residential properties, I think, you know, through no fault of their own right. It's not, I think there's a line there that says, are we rewarding people that probably should have done something differently when you're talking about you're not insured? But I also know that people have socioeconomic conditions right now, so I'll leave it alone and move on past it. The other thing is, though, is back when I was watching the feds do all their money handing out, there was really some problems with enforcement to make sure that people aren't being corrupt with the system. And did I just hear you say that it'll just be a waiver that somebody signs to LDO, or what's the mechanism to make sure folks aren't trying to take advantage of this situation illegally?
So the uninsured component to that, Councilman.
No, excuse me for interrupting, but I'm okay, you know, let's move past the non-insured. Probably didn't say the politically correct thing just now, but I'm really concerned about folks that will scheme this program illegally, and what is our mechanism for monitoring those type of behaviors?
So if I may, Chairman, answer that. One of the things I've learned, I think, in this job so far is that I'm going to have to let some people do their jobs. So as legislator, I think that this is a great idea, and we're putting forth a really goodwill intent to help folks who are suffering or organizations that will make a difference. When it comes to weeding out the bad guys and good good girls and bad girls, whatever, I think we really need to lean on our LDO to make that determination. They are our boots on the ground. They are the enforcement side of government. And I think that we really need to lean on them at this time. And I have talked to LDO, and LDO has told me, we are very supportive in whatever you want to do as a council, and we will figure it out. And so I would say to that, I would really, really lean on them for their enforcement capabilities to make sure that the rules are being followed and that they're legitimate cases.
All right, Mr. Chair, I'll just follow up with one more question, then I'll let go. Councilman Gilbert always says, where's the teeth? And so giving them the responsibility to enforce it, where's the teeth in that enforcement? What are the penalties? Are there anything we're writing into this that says anything more than we're going to cite you and maybe the judge will fine you $50 for cheating the city?
I do not know. Again, I think that would be something, I mean, if LDO wants to withhold a CO, that seems to be the only teeth we have outside of a $50 fine, as we always are alluding to. But I think that when the cases come to LDO, they're going to be able to determine whether they are eligible rather quickly. Remember, we're talking about rebuilding from scratch.
Sure.
And I think that is a precursor and a foundation that's very strong and able to make determination.
Well, I just want to say, Councilman, that I think this shows a good heart on your part, and I want to thank you for your efforts. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right. Thank you, sir. Any other questions on this particular item? Is there any objection to having this placed on the agenda with the change that Councilman Ledford requested at the very beginning?
That will be in 2 weeks, sir.
2 weeks. Seeing no, Councilwoman Coonrod, I see your hand, ma'am.
Thank you, Chair. Lefford, don't know if you have a sponsor, co-sponsor, but
I was hoping we'd all jump on there, but
yeah,
I'm open.
I'll be happy to.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Phil, hearing that, please get this placed on the agenda 2 weeks out with Councilman Ledford and Councilwoman Coonrod as the sponsors.
I will do it.
All right. Is there anything further to come before the Legislative Committee this afternoon? Seeing none, we're going to adjourn into attorney-client. See everybody back in just a moment.
Thank you, everyone.
See you soon.